Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 13th of February. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The planned confirmation of Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo is postponed after the opposition party raised major objections. The vote will now take place on Monday. The former Vice President of Korean Air is handed a one-year jail term for aviation law violations following her nut rage on an airplane late last year. Plus, after talking for 17 hours in Belarus, Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees a ceasefire deal with Ukraine that will start on Sunday. We begin with what was a dramatic day at the National Assembly over the confirmation vote on Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo. After some rather vocal confrontations, the rival parties agreed to push the vote back until next Monday. Park Ji-won has more.
The country's two main rival parties have agreed to postpone a vote on the confirmation of Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo after a contentious afternoon that led them to call off the session until next Monday. Earlier in the day, lawmakers from the main opposition party boycotted parliamentary activities. They were protesting the confirmation of the nominee in committee this Thursday afternoon, with only lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party unilaterally voting to move the vote onto the full assembly.
이완구 후보자의 사퇴를 국민의 이름으로 촉구한다. 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 새누리당의 일방적 경과보고서 채택을 강력히 규탄한다. 규탄한다. 규탄한다.
Earlier in the morning, the ruling Saenuri Party had urged the opposition party to cooperate and allow the vote to proceed as scheduled in order to avoid a vacuum in state affairs.
Even long before I was elected floor leader, when the nominee was still the floor leader of the party, both parties had agreed that the full assembly would vote on the nominee following the two-day confirmation hearing.
However, the main opposition party said it hoped to delay the vote to sometime later this month, given the various allegations surrounding the nominee's past.
Since I have worked with the nominee who was my previous counterpart on many issues at the Assembly, I really wanted him to come through the confirmation hearing well. Unfortunately, and very regrettably, he has fallen short of people's expectations.
The ruling Saenuri Party holds a majority in the Assembly, and if it wanted to, it could go ahead with the vote on its own. However, experts say it's not likely, as the presidential office has already been criticized for its lack of compromise and communication, especially with personnel matters. The burden of pushing through the confirmation might be too heavy for the administration and potentially cripple future Assembly sessions. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And the postponement of the vote on the Prime Minister nominee means President Park will have to wait until next week until she carries out her planned cabinet reshuffle. For more on what we can expect, Chae-Sun reports.
On Thursday, the spokesperson at the presidential office of Cheongwade said President Park stands by the principle of carrying out the reshuffles after the Prime Minister nominee is approved and recommends her cabinet. The National Assembly Speaker has said the Parliament will vote on Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo on Monday, with or without the opposition party present. That means the president's shakeups are likely to occur the same day or the next. With her economic revitalization plan and reform drive in need of a boost and her approval ratings hitting an all-time low, the president is expected to waste no time appointing people to get state business on track. Reports of Korean ambassador to China Kwon Young-se's pending replacement Thursday roused speculation that Kwon, one of President Park's confidants, may be named the new presidential chief of staff. Current Chief of Staff Kim Gi-chun is widely speculated to step down after completing the reorganization of the presidential office. 2 to 3 cabinet ministers are likely to be replaced. A ruling party lawmaker close to the president, Yoo Gi-jun, is the highly anticipated candidate for Oceans Minister, while the Unification and Transport Ministers are other positions that could also be changed. President Park, who had named special advisors to bolster communication in running the country, is also set to announce a lineup of her political advisors. Chae-Sun, ARIRANG News.
Japanese lawmakers are demanding Prime Minister Shinzo Abe tell them what he's going to say in his statement in August to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Abe has hinted that he only intends to discuss the content with his ministers and close aides. Many are worried the right-wing Japanese leader intends to take out some phrases apologizing for Tokyo's wartime atrocities. Connie Kim has more.
A debate is raging in Japan's parliament over a statement to be delivered by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in August to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Last month, Abe indicated he will not use certain terms such as colonial rule and aggression, deep remorse, or heartfelt apology, which were included in Tokyo's 1995 statement by then Prime Minister Domichi Murayama. The country's main opposition Democratic Party has labeled Abe's remarks intolerable and demanded the content of his statement be shared with and discussed in Parliament, not just within the confines of Abe's cabinet.
Don't you think it's necessary to discuss the contents of the statement with Parliament for the sake of national consent?
It's hard to pass a resolution in Parliament. We'll announce a statement under our cabinet.
And in a rare move, the new Komeito Party, part of Abe's ruling coalition, has voiced its concerns, saying the past statements were announced after consultation with lawmakers.
The statement is accepted at home and abroad as the basic position of Japan. It's common sense that a consensus is reached within the coalition parties.
Adding to the conflict and confusion, the chairman of Abe's ruling Liberal Democratic Party's General Council, Toshihiro Nikai, said it's only sensible that the cabinet coordinate the upcoming statement with different parties. The international community has been calling on Japan to address its historic past wrongdoings and issue a sincere apology. And with Japanese lawmakers calling for Abe to strike a forgiving tone, analysts say the Japanese leader is under growing pressure to make a heartfelt apology for Japan's past wrongdoings. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Korea has condemned comments made by a top Japanese diplomat claiming sovereignty over the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island in the East Sea. Seoul's foreign ministry says such claims are an act of historical regression and shows Japan has no repent for its imperialistic past, including its past invasion of Korea. This comes after Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida said Dokdo is part of Japan's territory during a speech in Parliament on Thursday. The Korean ministry warned that Japan should not take actions that counter efforts to bring peace, stability and co-prosperity to Northeast Asia. It added that Seoul will firmly respond to Tokyo's claims over Dokdo, which is Korean territory by history, geography and international law. The United States has a new defense secretary after the Senate overwhelmingly approved Ashton Carter in a bipartisan 93-5 vote. Carter will most likely be sworn in early next week. He has a lot on his plate as he gears up to start his new role, with the United States facing numerous highly complex national security challenges across the world, including the increasingly intense fight against the extremist group that calls itself Islamic State. Now, Carter, who is an author and physicist, was Deputy Secretary of Defense between 2011 and 2013. The 60-year-old replaces Chuck Hagel, who stepped down after less than 2 years on the job. A Seoul court has sentenced the former vice president of Korean Air to 1 year in prison for violating aviation safety law by ordering a taxiing plane to return to the gate. Jo Yeon-ah, the eldest daughter of the airline's chairman, ordered a senior crew member to deplane in New York last December for not serving her nuts according to the first-class manual. Judge Oh Song-woo said the incident was a case where, quote, human dignity was trampled on. The report said it took into consideration that Jo was the mother of 20-month-old twins, but stressed that her actions harmed the victims. Jo had pleaded innocent to the charge, arguing the airport runway was not part of the flight path. The court, however, said the air path covers the entire course from departure to arrival, which includes the runway. Prior to the ruling, Jo had submitted 6 letters of apology to the judges, appealing for leniency. Prosecutors had initially sought a 3-year prison term for Jo earlier this month. Now, a decision on whether to close one of Korea's longest-serving nuclear power reactors has been postponed. Local residents and environmentalists have been calling for the immediate closure of the Walsong-1 reactor, which is 32 years old, and they are doing so primarily out of safety concerns. Kwon Soo-ah reports.
오늘도 굉장히 긴 하루가 될 것으로 예상을 합니다.
Delayed once again. Despite a marathon meeting on Thursday, the fate of Korea's second oldest nuclear reactor hangs in the balance, with a third meeting on the issue scheduled for the end of this month. Korea's nuclear watchdog needs to decide on whether to restart the Walsong-1 reactor or to shut it down forever. The nuclear plant, one of 23 in the nation, was temporarily shut down for review after it reached its designed lifespan. Last October, the Nuclear Safety Board evaluated the Walsong-1 as safe to go for another 10 years. It's not uncommon practice to extend the life of reactors. The oldest Kori-1 reactor is already 8 years into an extension it received in 2007. Those arguing for an extension not only cite safety, but that it costs less than building a new plant and is less harmful to the environment. But residents of Gyeongju, where the plant is located, and environmentalist groups see the issue differently, claiming the reactor has to be shut down immediately and permanently. The debate has been growing since Korea's state-run nuclear power agency called for an expansion of the Walsong-1 reactor's lifespan in 2009. Demonstrators gathered in front of the Nuclear Commission's headquarters, raising safety concerns which could lead to a disaster like Japan's Fukushima accident.
We are worried about nuclear radiation. They say the amount is less than what comes from taking an X-ray, but we don't take X-rays 365 days a year. We do breathe in the air every day.
With even experts divided on the issue, more deliberation on the matter seems unavoidable. And adding extra weight to the Walsong-1 decision is a line of other aging reactors waiting to be judged on their operational lifespans. Kwon Soo-ah, ARIRANG News.
A last-ditch effort to find a diplomatic end to the months-long Ukraine crisis has produced a document signed off by the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, Germany and France. For a closer look, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. So, Eunice, there is this agreement, a second agreement out of Belarus, we should add, that seems to sketch out a kind of roadmap to peace, but this really is just the start of what is a big job ahead, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, Mark. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in fact, coming out of that big summit, did say that the leaders agreed on the major points. There's still a lot of details left to be sorted out. And of course, the question of implementation. How will the pro-Russia separatists on the ground take this document? Nonetheless, it was a huge task to get Ukraine and Russia on the same page. The document, a result of nearly 17 hours of grueling overnight negotiations mediated by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Francois Hollande. Now, Chancellor Merkel described this pact as a, quote, glimmer of hope, no more, no less, while America's top diplomat, Secretary John Kerry, later hailed it as a, quote, potential breakthrough to end the bitter conflict that continued to rage on throughout the talks that had bled into Thursday morning. Now, the main points: an unconditional ceasefire that kicks in by midnight into Sunday. Both sides are to withdraw heavy weapons, rebels to the front lines set by the September Minsk agreement, and Kiev to the current line, which would create a wider buffer zone of 50 kilometers. More autonomy would be granted in rebel-held territories of eastern Ukraine to be guaranteed by constitutional reform by the end of this year. Also, all foreign troops and mercenaries are to withdraw, and Ukraine to regain control over its border with Russia, again by the end of 2015.
Well, let's hope this glimmer of hope turns into something more solid over the coming weeks and months. Ukraine, meanwhile, though, Eunice, is keeping its eye on its economic recovery. The economy is in a very bad way over there, and there has been a new IMF aid package announced.
Right. Christine Lagarde made that announcement of financial aid of $17.5 billion while those talks in Minsk were ongoing. It is part of a 4-year economic revitalization plan worked out with Kiev that aims to create a $40 billion lifeline, if you will, that will also kick in much needed reforms in the country. The World Bank also earlier today announced it was considering to pitch in with a help of up to $2 billion mark.
And we have an update out of Egypt. Several days after the Australian journalist was freed, a court in Egypt has decided the 2 remaining Al Jazeera journalists will be allowed to go free after posting bail.
Right. We're, of course, talking about Mohammed Fahmy and Bahar Mohammed. They have been in jail for more than 400 days on charges they were spreading lies to support the Muslim Brotherhood, designated a terrorist organization by Cairo. Of course, both of them have vehemently denied that charge. Relatives were visibly taken with joy when they heard the announcement. The development comes less than 2 weeks after their Australian colleague Peter Greste was deported back home. But the court did say that it would move ahead with the retrial of the remaining Al Jazeera journalists, with the next session set for February 23rd. The high-profile case, of course, has attracted wide criticism from human rights groups and journalists alike.
Yeah, that's very true. And there are still Egyptian national journalists, like you say, still in prison over there. So we'll wait for an update on that. But thank you very much, Eunice, and we'll see you back at noon.
See you then.
The European Central Bank has raised its emergency liquidity assistance to banks in debt-strapped Greece, according to sources in the industry. Reports say the ceiling was raised by €5 billion, that's roughly $5.7 billion US dollars, to 65 billion euros. This development came as Greece's new anti-austerity Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras, took his new government's debt and reform plan to an EU summit in Brussels. Last week, the central bank announced it would no longer accept Greek sovereign bonds as collateral for future loans. Now, shifting gears a lot. Sex in the City, Prison Break, House of Cards, Law and Order. They're all very familiar titles, hit American TV shows that have won worldwide acclaim and popularity. The producers and directors of these shows are currently right here in Korea to share their insights. But as our Connie Lee tells us, some of them are looking at Korean TV shows and dramas for some new inspiration.
It's one of the major cultural exports pumped out of Korea. Korean TV shows, more simply known as K-dramas, are becoming a source of inspiration for TV producers outside of the country.
I really believe that Korea is the next frontier.
The next frontier?
That's why I'm here. One of the reasons we came is we've already optioned a number of formats, Korean formats.
Marty Alderstein, a top producer of the popular American TV series Prison Break and Last Man Standing, is now in Seoul, and he's on the lookout. At the Content Insight seminar hosted by the Korea Creative Content Agency, he and other industry leaders spoke on what really makes for good TV.
What people want to watch are characters and storytelling. One of the Israeli channels told me that Korean soap operas sell really well in Israel, and that sort of piqued my interest. I couldn't figure out why, and then I understood, because the strong storylines and the attractiveness of the people, and they sell very well around the world.
Exports of Korean TV content have been steadily increasing in recent years, with about 24 countries on the receiving end. And now there looks to be greater potential for continued growth, with more show producers looking abroad for the best story ideas.
It's happening all the time right now. it's kind of all the rage.
John David Coles, who directed hit shows like Sex and the City and most currently House of Cards, credits his own success to strong storylines that are culturally transcendent.
Because at the heart is a simple, strong premise. That's a story, really, not a complicated plot.
Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with manager Uli Stilicke, who continues to surprise everyone with his style of managing, as it was confirmed that he'll attend the K-League Classic's opening day. Now, with 61-year-old set to return to Korea either on March 5th or 6th after his 3-week vacation, he's set to come back in time to catch the opening day match between the Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors and Seongnam FC on March 7th. Now, though it doesn't seem like it's something out of the norm, he will still become the first foreign manager to attend a K-League opener as he continues to seek the domestic talent instead of sticking with just the overseas players. And during the match, he's set to watch 36-year-old Lee Dong-guk, who missed out on the Asian Cup due to an injury, and look for a possible replacement for Cha-duri, who retired from the national team. Meanwhile, the national team, who finished runner-up in the Asian Cup, jumped up 15 spots in the latest FIFA rankings and is now ranked 54th in the world. And speaking of domestic talents, figure skating fans in Korea had their eyes on the Korean figure skaters on the first day of the Four Continents Figure Skating Championships, which kicked off on Thursday at the Mokdong Ice Rink. And on the first day, the pairs short program took place with Megan Duhamel and Eric Radford of Canada taking the early lead with 75.67 points, with Peng Cheng and Zhang Hao of China in second with 69.81 points. Meanwhile, for Rebecca Kim, who was born in Korea but raised in Lithuania, paired with Kirill Minov to represent Korea but finished in 9th place with 46.54 points. And staying on ice with the ISU World Singles Distance Speed Skating Championships taking place this weekend, the focus is on Lee Sang-hwa and whether or not she'll be able to win her 3rd straight gold medal in the event. Now, with the Olympic gold medalist nearly ending her medal streak last weekend, her knee is a huge concern going into the World Single Distance Speed Skating Championships in the Netherlands. But expectations remain high as a 3rd straight gold medal in the 500-meter event will make her the first Asian speed skater to achieve the feat. Meanwhile, Mo Tae-bum also seeks his 3rd straight gold medal in the 500-meter event, with Lee Seung-hoon competing in 5 long-distance races this weekend. Now, for golf fans here in the nation, the 2015 LPGA season has so far been an exciting one, with the Koreans winning the first 2 events of the season. But the question is, will they be able to break the single-season win record? Now, the current record for the most wins in a single season dates back to 2006 and 2009, where the Koreans combined for 11 victories. But after Chen Ayana and super rookie Kim Se-young notched the first 2 victories of the season, they're definitely on pace to break that record. Now, the record doesn't include players like Michelle Wee nor Lydia Ko, and just the players who hold Korean citizenship. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, it's a very cold morning. The sensory temperatures are still near -8 here in the capital. The strong gusty winds are adding a chill to the air, and the afternoon highs will be as chilly or slightly milder than yesterday. The air is much fresher and the skies are clear today, but dry weather continues across the nation with dry weather watch in effect for most of the eastern parts of the peninsula. And you know, cold and dry weather increases fire danger, so extra precaution should be taken in case of any wildfires. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. So the high in Seoul will climb up to 3, while the top temperatures in Daegu and Gwangju will rise to 6, and Busan will peak at 7 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 8 and 4, and Dokdo only makes to freezing mark. Now things will get much milder again this upcoming weekend. High in Seoul will peak at 9 on Sunday, and it seems like we have rain in the forecast next Monday. That's all for now. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jiyeon, for the weather. And that's all we do have for now. Plenty more stories are on our website, and we'll be back at noon Korea time with our next newscast. Until then, goodbye.